difference here is Mussolini was a pretty bad guy. He wasn't the worst guy in the world. He wasn't Stalin. He wasn't Lenin. But Mussolini was, let's say, at least a mixed bag, leaning on the side of bad. He was a bad political leader. Franco was, broadly speaking, pretty good.
So there is a saying that is wrongly attributed to Lenin that fascism is capitalism in decay. Across the Western world, we are seeing either old school conservative parties go increasingly mask off fascist, or we're just seeing the whole Overton window completely shift to the right wing. And in America, it has already been historically more right wing than, say, Western Europe and stuff, but now it has gone even worse. I've been arguing for years at this point that American conservatism is just straight up fascism. And especially with Elon Musk's Twitter, we just see people going mask off more and more, including Elon Musk himself. And today I wanted to talk about this, but also make the interesting note about maybe 21st century Western fascism is it seems to have no economic ideology at all. Like, when you hear the fascists speak in the 1920s and 30s, although you see a lot of the similar tropes about, like, Western civilization, you have the anti-Semitism, you have the xenophobia, you have the racism, there is some sort of economic message in there about, like, the native peoples of whatever European country is being spoken about, and how, like, foreigners have either taken their job or talk about, like, Jewish capitalists and stuff, like, ruining the country. There was an economic fascism to it. But in the UK, and what I'm going to be focusing on more, like, North America, mainly the US, there is no economic message anymore. But what it does is obviously tap into people's dissatisfaction with their material conditions, but is more now just completely focused on distraction. And this has even changed a lot since 2016 with, you know, the first campaign of Donald Trump, where he was saying, you know, I'm going to bring back American jobs from China, I'm going to do all this stuff, right? No Republican candidate talks about this anymore. They don't talk about economics because they can't argue an economic message that anyone would vote for. And how the Democrats even enable this fascism to gain popularity is their alternative doesn't really offer much economic change either. It's half measures, or Biden can't get it done because of the parliamentarian. And even, like, the notion that Joe Biden is going to run again, when all the polling shows that if he's up against Donald Trump, at the moment he's going to lose, I think sums it up perfectly and sums up how liberals are complicit with rising fascism, because I bet most of the Democrats are going to side with Biden, support his campaign, he'll lose, and he would literally have handed over America to an actual fascist who's gone even more far right since he was out of office. And it's just for pure hubris as well. And I do want to talk about the economic stuff a bit, but I also want to focus on, like, leading right-wing figures and how they represent different, I guess, attractions of fascism, and why capitalists generally are complicit in fascism. Because you often do have the ideological fascists, and I'd say that's like a Matt Walsh type, who believes everything he says, doesn't say anything really for money. He has a massive platform, sure, but he does believe in what he's saying. Compared to someone like maybe a Ben Shapiro, who has certain elements of, you know, what he believes that is compatible with fascism, but is obviously completely pandering because he runs a massive conservative business. So if he came out with a video, I hate Donald Trump, which he does, you know, he's never going to do that because it hurts his bottom line. And then you have people like Elon Musk, who literally represent the same type of businessman in fascist Germany, who were just, like, waiting for the fascists to get in so they could give them lucrative contracts and give them, like, Jewish businesses and Jewish property and stuff. Elon Musk represents that. And you can see that for his pandering and meeting up with right-wing politicians, but he also engages with this fascist rhetoric and really helps it flourish on his social media platform because he wants to be liked. It's even sadder than a capitalist just wanting money. He's never had any real love in his life, so he literally panders to fascists to get it. And then we have someone like Jordan Peterson, who could have maybe provided, like, the ideology of the fascist far right in North America, because he's from Canada. But in my opinion, he's just, like, so mentally ill. It's more like an emperor has no clothes situation, where everyone just keeps enabling him and doesn't ever call him out on him clearly mentally degrading. So going to talk about all of this today. Like the video, follow me on social media at the Kavernacle, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Threads, on Blue Sky. Consider becoming a patron, trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible. Benefits include access to the Discord server, message me for your code once you've signed up, access to my Nintendo Switch friend code, and access to old exclusive content, and also check out the subreddit and check out my second channel. The links to everything down in the description. So before we talk about like multiple figures and talk about how they represent fascism is capitalism in decay, or just like how capitalists are okay with fascism, I just want to talk about the framework, or like the economy in the West and how this is enabling fascism. So we have to go back to 2016 as this moment of, I guess, political populism, where there were these big events where the ruling class who supported one side said, yeah, vote for this, vote for me, and I will change everything. And that was Brexit, and that was the election of Donald Trump. So just like more like far-right campaigns, both of these had a heavy dose of xenophobia. A lot of revisionism is now emerging around Brexit, like it was purely economic reasons. But, you know, I was 20 years old. I remember what it really was. And what it was largely driven by was racism and xenophobia, and, you know, don't let anyone tell you different. You had all these adverts talking about Turkey joining the EU with like the implicit thing of, oh my god, 100 million Muslims can come to England. So much stuff about refugees, migrants, and especially about migrants who like came from like non-EU countries. It got quite bizarre at times. But underlying that was also like an economic message of, oh, 350 million more for the NHS. I don't know, just like money for more things because we pay the EU so much. It was all lies pretty much. But there was that economic element. And although it was like a very racist campaign, there's one thing that made this racism mixed with economic populism more effective is that, yeah, in 2016, more people were realizing, yeah, there's something wrong. There is something wrong with this economy. There is something wrong with this country. Like, living standards are getting worse. NHS is getting worse. All the things we used to, you know, take for granted even are getting worse under this conservative government. So surely something is wrong. And if you're preying on like more vulnerable people based on like education or poverty, well, you tell them, well, it's those migrants stealing your job. It's the EU dictatorship that, you know, we have to pay so much money to stay in this. And all it means is basically the ruling elite in this country get richer and you get poorer. And people like Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, all insanely wealthy people, were saying this, and they won because of this, because people were dissatisfied, and also their culture war, racism also was effective in the campaign in a country like the UK. Honestly, really not surprising. And you had that element of the fascism, but like I said, it was kind of a blend of economic and cultural. And in the US with Donald Trump, I know a lot of it was cultural as well, and it was very xenophobic as well, like, you know, saying banning all Muslims, you know, banned a lot of Muslim immigrants from coming to the US for a bit, banning trans people in the military, lots of stuff like that, which resembles kind of stuff we see today. But then you had the economic stuff where he says, you know, I've bought all your politicians. I've donated to Democrats and Republicans, and they've always worked for me. And now I will be president. You know, I can't be bought because I'm so rich. And also I'm going to bring back the jobs. You know, all those jobs, all the capitalists put overseas, all the globalists, he said, put overseas and deprived you. I am going to bring them back, and I'm going to develop some sort of economy for the American workers, make America great again, America before everything, including in foreign policy. But of course, like, the reality of Donald Trump's presidency, it was basically a continuation of the Obama administration in like pretty much most ways, but just like more right-wing, with Trump trying to attack things like healthcare, trying to attack a lot of popular policies, but because his party is such a mess, they never really got anything properly done apart from massive tax cuts for the rich. So that was the landscape of 2016. But of course, Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden eventually because a lot of the country was sick of him because he was so polarizing. Wasn't a very good president either. Although he did get the second most votes in history in a US election, Joe Biden still won. And since then, the right wing have gone increasingly mask off. Now, what has happened is Donald Trump was the mask coming off, and so many Republicans have supported him. But even he's recently made comments about, like, yeah, you didn't used to care about the trans stuff, and now it's all you talk about. And he's made comments which people have been mad about on certain things because he never used to campaign on that stuff. And it shows you how more far right and culture war focused the GOP are more than ever. All they care about is trans stuff. And this might massively backfire because the Trumpist culture war candidates didn't do so great in the midterms. But if you watched the Republican debates the other night, and a couple weeks ago, was it? All they talk about is culture war now. Just absolutely insane stuff. Like, you're literally watching a bunch of careerist capitalists just spout fascist rhetoric for 2 hours because that's what they think will win them votes now. And that is true with the Republican Party. Like, you have to win elections based on, like, you know, the whole electorate, and there's a lot of people who vote for either party, but then you have the hardcore who love Donald Trump. So they're all being like these mask-off fascists. And also, like I said, in 2023, the landscape economically is so different because now the effects of climate change are pretty much undeniable to everyone. Like, everyone sees it. You can't pretend like Ben Shapiro used to, like, oh, if your house goes underwater in Florida, why wouldn't you just buy like a new house? Doesn't that solve climate change? No, we're seeing like insane heat around every part of the world. Floods, we're seeing massive forest fires way more regularly. So everyone can realize there is something wrong. And to a lot of people on the left, we know it's pretty much capitalism, it's these giant corporations, and there even is like a rising corporate sentiment, I realise, on the right wing. The sad part is it's all tied up with anti-Semitism and conspiracy theories about vaccines and Bill Gates. It feels like everyone knows they're getting shafted. Everyone at this point. It's not just like a highly mobilised group of people who might vote for a certain candidate or something. It feels like everyone realises this. And you don't hear many people making arguments about how great capitalism is anymore. It's all about like freedom, but also upholding the status quo culturally. So that's why all of these people are doubling down on trans and anti-trans stuff. And you saw recently the Conservative Party conference in the UK basically was the Fascist Party conference. They're talking about letting Nigel Farage into the Conservative Party. Nigel Farage, who was seen as like this far-right guy only like 5 years ago, now he can join the Conservatives because they've absorbed that. The reason there is no far-right party rising in the UK right now, like most of Europe that have parliamentary systems, is because the Tories fulfil that need. If you are a fascist, just vote for the Tories. The only thing you might have a problem with is there's some diversity in the fascism because it's more Western chauvinism. But at the same time, if you want your policies implemented, most of them at least, you will probably like the Conservatives. And in the US, you do have some people who are like America Firsters who are like more fascistic, I guess. But at the same time, they still have options in the party themselves. And Donald Trump is still running for president, so they have that for them. I think the Conservative Party conference just encapsulates massively how they're not even trying to win the economic argument anymore because they can't. So now it's all culture. And although they have always had a history of this stuff, engaging in culture war, we all know Conservatives love that, there was always an economic ideology underlying it. With Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, it was neoliberalism. With Donald Trump's first election, it was like economic populism. The same with Brexit in some ways as well. But now it's like, nah, like, we know the country is fucked. We know the economy is screwed. And we know we can't offer you anything to help you. Because so many of you are struggling now, you know, using food banks, living in poverty. Numbers of working poor are just increasing, so you can no longer tell people, well, just get a job and work hard, and you can achieve great things. Now it's like, you can have 2 jobs and work hard and not even afford the basic necessities of life. So that's why they're doubling down on trying to engage in this stuff. So that's the political economic landscape for why fascism is rising, and the Conservative Party and the Republican Party, in my opinion, are both subscribed to a fascist, Western chauvinist ideology. I would just say maybe the Republican Party is more white supremacist than the British Conservative Party, but I still think that actual voters share a lot of similarities with Republican voters. But now let's get into the leading figures in the American online right and talk about the differences between them and why these different types of people, these millionaire political pundits, CEOs and stuff like that, why they're okay with fascism. And there's a multitude of reasons. So first up, we have Matt Walsh, who's one of the leading hosts at The Daily Wire, which has more failed artists and intellectuals than the Third Reich, just stealing that quote. from Don Draper when he says it about Sterling Cooper and Mad Men, but it's very true because a lot of these people wanted to be actors, a lot of these people wanted to be filmmakers. Ben Shapiro wanted to make films in Hollywood. Michael Knowles and Brett Cooper failed actors as well, but Matt Walsh isn't that. Matt Walsh is a true believer in my opinion, and he also resembles the type of unremarkable person who can rise in fascism, in that conservatives often tell us the world is a meritocracy, but Matt Walsh is meant to be an intellectual, and he only graduated high school. He has no expertise on anything he talks about. Even when he's given testimony to political office about trans rights, he knows nothing about it. He's not a doctor. He doesn't have a degree in politics. He doesn't have any sort of medical degree. He's just some random ass dude. And if you hear him when he was less relevant, hanging around with people with fascist tattoos and just being a general creep talking about 16-year-old girls and the survival of the Anglo-Saxon race, it's pretty clear this guy is just a fascist, right? But he's a fascist who is a true believer who's got a job at a network like the Daily Wire. And the only thing that really separates him from maybe like Nick Fuentes is that he doesn't say anything about Israel. Although he did recently say something about it, and that's because the Daily Wire is extremely pro-Zionist. You're not a leading host there if you start saying stuff about Israel, but I genuinely believe he does have a problem with not just Israel, but with Jewish people as well. He's unapologetic about the most gross things he says about Native Americans and Manifest Destiny, saying it was a good thing. The things he says about trans people, obviously making that whole propaganda movie about trans people. And of course, the things he says about women constantly. Like, this guy absolutely hates women to an extreme degree because he is an ideological fascist, and he's actually upset a lot of people in conservative circles because he's so mask off. Like, he's not just playing a game to pander to Trump supporters. He's not just playing a game to pander to any conservative that he wants on his show. Like, he just believes this stuff and he says it, right? But like I said, he's the unremarkable person who rises in this movement because he really doesn't have anything insightful to say. He hasn't constructed some sort of new ideology like himself that mixes like economic populism with his fascist culture war stuff. It literally just is all culture war. All culture war, but he firmly believes in it, and he's obviously pretty dangerous when he has a bunch of money behind him because he can be so influential with things like films like What is a Woman. But that is obviously the type that fascism often draws anyway. These people who feel like hard done by the system, have delusions of grandeur, but don't want to put in the work that meets in with their own ideology of meritocracy. Like, he didn't want to go to university and, I don't know, get a medical degree so he could be an expert on trans healthcare and stuff. No, he's just a reactionary fascist, but out of everyone who is prominent, I think he is like someone who just believes everything he's saying. But let's move on to his boss. So here's another person who is interesting because he's so okay with enabling the rise of fascism. Like, the Daily Wire, along with Twitter, is some of the biggest mainstream promoters of fascism in American politics, with people like Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh doing the heavy lifting there. But obviously what makes it interesting is Ben Shapiro is Jewish. So a lot of this insanity these people promote, Michael Knowles talking about, you know, Francisco Franco being a good guy, lots of the conspiracy stuff these people delve into, even a lot of the hysteria around trans rights, a lot of the conspiracies all go back to, oh, it's the Judeo-Bolsheviks, it's the cultural Marxists, it's a Jewish conspiracy. They're doing this to undermine Western civilization. But Ben Shapiro is head of a network that constantly pushes this stuff. But here's the interesting thing about Ben Shapiro is that he does have a very far-right ideology himself when it comes to Muslim people, when it comes to black people, when it comes to just United States politics in general. But of course, he also is this businessman and he loves making his crappy Daily Wire movies. He likes making a lot of money. So he combines like two elements of what draws people to fascism, in that, yeah, he might like a lot of the fascist tendencies of a Ron DeSantis doing this stuff in Florida. Like, him and Matt Walsh both love Ron DeSantis because he's implemented fascism in Florida more effectively than Donald Trump could ever implement it on a national scale. So he definitely likes that stuff. I'm not saying he doesn't. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of anti-Semitism directed at Ben Shapiro from other conservatives, and I've covered it on this channel. So he knows it's out there. But he constantly downplays it as well. He says the real anti-Semites are actually anti-Zionists like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. It's not Kanye West. It's not the followers of Kanye West. It's not the fascists who love Nick Fuentes and constantly say anti-Semitic stuff to Ben Shapiro. No, it's the left. And maybe he genuinely thinks that. Like, maybe he does think the left are the real anti-Semites because he's such a fanatical Zionist. But at the same time, I feel like part of the reason is that he knows he can't start calling out conservatives for their blatant anti-Semitism because he runs a massive conservative network. If they view him as going on a war against mainstream conservatism at this point, they're going to stop watching the Daily Wire, making him less money. But you could see that throughout the Trump presidency, and that is very clear. Ben Shapiro hates Trump on multiple levels, but he had to keep pretending he's good. And only now is he subtly digging at Trump because Ron DeSantis is popular. But Ron DeSantis is not going to be the next president. He's not going to be the Republican nominee. So expect all of these conservatives to fall in line with Donald Trump again, because like I said, they care about the economic side, like Ben Shapiro. And also, as much as he personally doesn't like Donald Trump, a lot of the stuff Donald Trump would do in a second term is something Ben Shapiro will actually agree with anyway. But the only danger, of course, is a lot of this hatred and vitriol these people all whipping up does often end with, oh, it's for Jews. And I don't think there's a place for Ben Shapiro in that. And I feel like if Matt Walsh ever had to leave the Daily Wire, he would turn on Ben Shapiro very, very quickly, because I do believe Matt Walsh doesn't actually like Jewish people either. So we talked about these people being attracted to this fascist ideology, or why they will help it flourish. But now let's get into one of the more sad cases, because it's so obvious what he's doing. So Elon Musk and Elon Musk's Twitter, he only bought it a year ago, and it's an absolute dumpster fire of racism, anti-Semitism, literally like having fascist accounts with verified ticks, running polls about if the Jews control everything, like posting insane conspiracy theories all the time. Like Twitter is just the worst, helping the rise of British far-right fringe politicians because they can pay for verification and get all their racism boosted. Like, Elon Musk has enabled so much fascist growth in the online space. Like, why would you even go and hide on 4chan? And of course, Elon Musk has made it clear he supports Republican politicians like Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis even launched his political campaign on Twitter itself. He constantly boosts people like Tucker Carlson's new terrible Twitter show. He defends people like Russell Brand. Like, Elon Musk is, at this point, I think, ideologically conservative, but it's clear his descent into that is motivated by, I think, primarily being liked. In his own life, like I said, we've documented it many times, made a video last week about his family, which is really weird. I just think he's never had that affection at all. So he likes getting it through whoever is his largest fan base. And maybe like 8 or 9 years ago, it was liberal environmentalists who love Elon Musk because of the Tesla car. The more moderate people who are obsessed with space and SpaceX, right? But over the last like 4 or so years, he's firmly just pandering to just the most fringe Republicans, tweeting all these conspiracy theories, actually personally whipping up anti-Semitism on his own social media site, right? And it's pretty clear the pandering has become something he actually believes in. But another element to Elon Musk is the business side, right? And although, you know, he probably super regrets buying Twitter in the first place, it's clear who the mark are with his verification. It's dumbass conservatives who can't get their tweets looked at by anyone unless they pay for verification. And it's clear he's pandering to all these conservatives with like boosting Tucker Carlson and stuff like that. He sees them as some sort of like economic base for this platform. And he reminds me a lot of all the German businessmen and German millionaires who sided with the fascists in Germany because it made them money, right? And the government said, here, you can have all this stuff, have these great contracts with the government, you can have these monopolies as well if you want, and we'll help you. And didn't Ron DeSantis recently sign a bill where Elon Musk's SpaceX workers can't sue him if they're involved in some sort of accident at his workplace because Elon Musk was helping Ron DeSantis, right? It's a nice little parallel there in that these businessmen will help fascism if it benefits them economically because they're safe, right? Elon Musk is a white South African American citizen who's one of the richest men in the world. If Ron DeSantis becomes president and starts cracking down on the trans community, minorities and stuff, Elon's fine. He doesn't care. Even if initially he didn't even believe the same stuff as this, it doesn't really matter. His ideology is money. It's the same with Rishi Sunak in the UK. Rishi Sunak's ideology is money. So that's why his attempts at culture war come across as so inauthentic and pathetic. And it's clear he's pandering, right? But Elon Musk was the same to an extent, where it is still clear he's pandering, but I think he's just been online so much lately. He does believe in all this stuff now as well. I think he's self-radicalized himself on the social media site he owns, which is like absolutely amazing. So I didn't really want to talk about this last person too much because I just believe they're so mentally unwell. I don't think in their current form, they represent part of the elite that are attracted to fascism and will, I don't know, engage in fascism and help fascism for like ideological reasons or economic reasons. But that is Jordan Peterson. But why I want to talk about him is I think he represents another part of why people are attracted to fascism, and that is just absolutely insane, hysterical anti-communism. Continue to say this, I don't care if people get annoyed. Ideological anti-communism, remember, that doesn't mean not being a communist. Ideological anti-communism is always fascism, pretty much. Like, always. These people always believe in the most unhinged conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, and they push them themselves, right? So Jordan Peterson, in my opinion, has always been an ideological fascist. And I believe that going back to when he was, you know, seen to be sane and rational. Like, I've covered his own work on fascist Germany, and it's just disgusting revisionism. And it's insane people never, ever called him out before he became, like, an obvious right-winger. But he represents something in that he's so scared of communism and he thinks communism is such a threat. He feels like fascism is far preferable. He even said so recently that the Soviet Union was worse than Germany in World War II. He literally said that on Twitter, right? And you actually just have to be a fascist to believe that. And he is one at this point. I always thought he had these tendencies. And I've read like Goebbels speeches, which resemble Jordan Peterson speeches, like this cultural Marxism stuff. He believes like Western chauvinism, Western supremacy, the conservative Western states, that is worth saving no matter what. And anything that subverts gender, family norms, political norms, economics, like capitalism, that is all seen as something to be eradicated. And in that ideology, he will side with anyone. And that's why he loves Elon Musk so much. That's why he's gone firmly mask off, joined the Daily Wire, and that's why it's attracted him. Because like Matt Walsh, I do think the ideology has driven Jordan Peterson more than the money. I also think Jordan Peterson, more than Matt Walsh, has a bit of a god complex about him. But also it's hard to analyse him at this point because he just seems very mentally ill. And I just think people are enabling him, including his daughter, and they're just using him because he has that credibility from, 6 years ago. And here's a question for people. Do you think people at the Daily Wire read Jordan Peterson's Twitter and think he sounds sane? And think he is sane? Like, he's actually addicted. He's tweeting non-stop all the time. But it's getting worse and worse. Like, his tweets are like these weird haiku poems. And they just make no sense. Like, he even quote tweeted me the other day, writing me a little poem. And it's just like this guy has completely lost his mind, talking about being on meat diets, which I made a video about that as well. And it's just at this point, I'm just like, I don't even know what he represents. The only thing he represents, I guess, is bizarre, hysterical anti-communism. That is often what fascists use to get into power in the first place, anti-communism. And we see that with, I guess, anti-wokeism, which might as well be called communism at this point, because it serves the same function as communism back in the day. It's like, if you vote for the Democrats, if you vote for liberals, if you vote for all these people, oh, that will help the communists. And now it's like, if you vote for Democrats or anyone on the left, you are helping woke ideology destroy Western civilization. It's propaganda that serves its own purpose. But I hope what this video did for you, or I guess it made you think about, because it's not completely comprehensive, is why people these days are being more drawn to fascism. And that's because of capitalism. But because people do not understand what capitalism even is, especially Americans, they think capitalism equals freedom, it's hard for people to diagnose why their material conditions are so poor. And it's easier to tell people that it's because of Western civilization being destroyed by the left. It's easier to prey on ignorant people's prejudices to get them to vote for you than try and outline, I don't know, some sort of economic message. Like, when I talk about how I would change the economy in the UK, people think I'm crazy sometimes because we're so conditioned by capitalism to think about the confines of our system rather than what we could change. And that's how you have rational people thinking Keir Starmer is the answer to the Tories, despite them being effectively the exact same thing. Because they cannot imagine a world where Jeremy Corbyn wins an election with, I don't know, a party that support him and brings in like a radical agenda to help save the country from capitalism. People are told that's unrealistic and we can't do that. But even now, they cannot win the argument on those grounds because their alternative to that doesn't sound very good. Yeah, we're going to attack workers' rights even more. So they have to distract us. They distract us with the trans panic. They distract us with fear-mongering about China. They distract us with basically everything. to make us either turn against each other or just distract us enough that we don't realize that our actual problems are these guys, our actual problem are the businessmen, and our actual problems are capitalism. They're not trans people. They're not immigrants. They're not refugees. These aren't our problems. There's plenty of space for all these refugees. There's plenty of ways we could mitigate climate change. But again, these are complex issues which purposefully are made even more complex by the media so we can keep engaging the culture war while capitalists actually loot these countries and capitalists actually usher in fascism, because that's far more beneficial than having any left-wing government come in, because a capitalist will always side with a fascist if it benefits them, but they will always side with a fascist over a leftist, because a fascist will preserve a status quo that will still benefit them. A leftist will threaten their power, and even like a liberal might not give them like all the power they want. And we have to remember, most capitalists are fundamentally like psychotic. You have to be a very vicious, nasty person with a huge ego to be one of these ruling elite people. And they do not live in the same world as us, and they do not think like us. As horrible as Elon Musk appears on Twitter, you would probably be deeply disturbed if you had an honest conversation with him for an hour and realize what he's actually like in private. So anyway, that is it for the video. Let me know if you have any thoughts that I haven't covered. I'd be interested to know what people think. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.